Yesterday we had a little preview of a poll that you participated in that seems to predict what you think will be happening in about 30 days. Now, we all wish we had the crystal ball that will tell us the future, and it turns out there is one type of poll that seems to be extremely predictive of futures small and big. It's called a prediction market. It's becoming more and more popular in the last couple of years as a tool to really indicate well ahead of time what will be the future. And today we have with us John Aristotle, who is going to talk to me about running a prediction market, what we learned from that about the future, and how all of you can participate in learning about it. Now, if I try to introduce John Aristotle Phillips, I should say, interesting trajectory of life. You probably heard of the Manhattan Project that took a lot of people to build a nuclear bomb. Turns out there was a version of it with one man who is known for trying to build one at home by himself. That's John. He ran for Congress. He advocates for many causes. He's been arguing with Congress lately and winning quite a bit. Share the stage with me and we'll tell the story together. Maybe that's a Thank you.
What, no limerick?
Yeah, there is one. Oh, you're sure? I will finish, but I'll start right away. John Phillips, there once was John Aristotle P., who brought tech to democracy's key. With data so fine, he helped votes align and shaped how elections should be. There you go.
Thank you.
Explain to us what prediction markets are.
So a prediction, first of all, thank you for having me here. That was quite moving. It was amazing, actually. So prediction markets are markets that are configured to help you forecast the future. Now, markets generally are pretty good at forecasting future events. Prices, for instance. If you want to know what the price of oil is going to be a year from now, you go to the commodities market and you look to see where the traders in the market are pricing oil to be delivered at a future date. If you want to know what pork bellies are going to cost, or corn, or even hurricane landfall options, very topical today, where the hurricane is likely to hit land. This is very important for insurance companies, for instance, and for homeowners who want to hedge risk. Markets they're not perfect, but they're pretty good. And they're better than other things, and we'll talk about that. So a prediction market it's like a stock market where traders are able to buy and sell shares on certain outcomes. And PredictIt is set up as a stock market, and it's set up to predict future events, specifically political events, but all kinds of other types of events, which we can talk about.
So PredictIt is, of course, the website that you run. It asks questions like who is going to win the presidency in 3 weeks? How does it look if I'm a person who wants to participate? What do I do? How does it feel?
So you go to PredictIt, you open an account, we do the player verification, in other words, the KYC, the Know Your Customer verification. And then you can make a deposit anywhere from $10 to $1,000 if you want. And you can then start to purchase shares of future events. So in the case of presidential campaign, will Harris be elected president in 2024? And right at this moment, you can buy one share, as an example, of Harris to be elected president. She's trading at about 50 cents. And this is a $1 winner-take-all contract. So if you put down 50 cents, you get $1 that she's going to be elected. You get $1 if she is elected. Or if she is not elected president, you lose your 50 cents. Now that price at 50 cents will fluctuate minute by minute, second by second, based on events that are taking place. And most importantly, what thousands and thousands and sometimes hundreds of thousands of traders think the odds are. Because that 50 cents translates into about 50% odds. If an event is priced at 60 cents, and you decide that event's going to happen, then you put down 60 cents, you get the $1 if it does, you lose your 60 cents if it doesn't. So this is how a prediction market works.
So let's go, say, 4 years ago. There's an election between Trump and Biden. Trump challenges the election a few days after. What do? You already call it, or you wait until he agrees to it? How do you deal with the fact?
Great question. And we have traders who think we should do things certain ways so that they win the bet. The fact of the matter is that the election markets are, to be a good prediction market, it's got to be tied to some truth source. So in this case, it's the Electoral College, and when the Electoral College count is finally done, that's when we resolve the market. Now, what's interesting is in that election, there were people who really, even today, but there were people at the time who didn't believe the election outcome post-election. And so there was trading in that market, which is another interesting thing. You don't need to stay in the market till the election. You can like Harris at 50 cents, and you can hate her at 60 cents. So you think 60 cents, the odds are too heavy that Harris is going to win. You can buy that market, buy that stock, and then sell it when you think it's gone up to the right price. So a fluctuating market where the value or the odds, the market thinks the odds are changing, you can make some money on that.
So right now you say it's 50-50 for Trump and Harris?
It is. I was checking the odds before I came up. It's really a coin flip at this point. And that's what the market is saying. It's not what I'm saying. It's what the market is saying. It's a coin flip.
And my read of that is that even if I like Harris to win, if I think Trump is going to win, I'm going to put money on him because I stand to make money of that. So it's a way of telling the truth better than what I want.
That's right. Or you can bet that somebody's going to lose, right? So you can take either side of that bet. And what happens is you think she's going to win and you think she's going to lose and you're happy at 50-50. We put you against each other in terms of put you together in the market.
So give me some things that you know. So I know that it's been extremely accurate over the last decade in predicting elections, gubernatorial, mayors. So give me some of the predictions that are kind of really interesting that are right now known that we don't know yet about the future.
Well, I mean, boy, there are all kinds of markets and we're not the only prediction market. We were the only prediction market, one of only two prediction markets 10 years ago when we got into this. And I'll talk a little bit about the history of prediction markets.
Please.
That's okay. So there are prediction markets on a variety of different things. I mentioned the commodities markets, which are effectively prediction markets, but tied to an underlying asset. I mentioned hurricane landfall options, which is no underlying asset it's tied to, but it's what people think the odds are. It's going to hit Tampa, it's going to hit St. Pete when it hits landfall. These markets have been around for actually a long time. We've been around 10 years. The University of Iowa has been running a prediction market for 30 years. But before that, before there was an internet, if you wanted to know, and before there was polling, so go back to the time of Abraham Lincoln. If you wanted to know who was going to win the presidential election at the time of Abraham Lincoln, what you would do is you would go down to Wall Street and literally on the steps of the stock exchange, it was a betting market. And the betting market sometimes, on some days, had more transactions than the stock market because there was so much money involved in people betting on these future political events. Now, some of the markets you mentioned that we've had interesting markets like in late 2019, we were contacted by an emergency room physician in Washington State. And he said, he was a predictive trader. And he said he's getting an unusual number of people with a respiratory illness coming into the emergency room. This is early 2020, late 2019. And would we put up a market on whether the WHO will declare a global pandemic? So that's the kind of market that you can put up. You can put up markets on who's going to win the Nobel Prize in physics. You can put up who's going to win the Nobel Peace Prize next year. You can put up markets on Academy Awards. You can put up markets on all kinds of things where there's some value in either public interest or hedgeable risk in knowing a little bit more about the future. Your analogy to a crystal ball was a really good one. It's not perfect, it's not 20/20 vision, but markets, because of the way they operate and because of that, frankly, the dollar incentive, you're betting on something that you think is going to happen as opposed to a public opinion poll where you're answering a question as to what you want to have happen. If the election were held tomorrow, for whom would you vote? is a common polling question. Markets don't care about who you want to have win. When you're in a market, you're betting on what you think is going to happen. And that's the difference. And when you have even a little bit of skin, and you've done some research on this, tell us about that.
Okay, I'm gonna share that, but then I'm gonna come back to you.
All right.
I don't want to lose you. Yeah, so we know each other for a while because years ago we had the idea of using prediction markets to try to predict climate issues. So I can ask the question, will 2024 be the hottest year on record? And I will have you guys put money on this bet, and some of you would be saying, yes, it's going to be the hottest one, and some of you are going to be saying no. And at the end of 2024, someone, NASA or the EPA, is going to announce, yes, it was, or no, it wasn't. And half of you will take the money of the other half. Those were correct. And we figured out early on that if you ask people to do that, not only do you get, in a way, a really good measure of what people actually are willing to say behind anonymous vein on the climate, but we also realize that it's really a good tool for people to change their mind. So if you take people who are climate deniers and you let them play the market and they keep losing money because they're wrong over time, at some point they start learning something about climate and they start to maybe identity-wise they still say I'm a climate denier, but practically they start putting money on the other side. So this is how we know each other. And actually I'm gonna use that as a chance to start sharing gossip. Because the climate markets are, at the time, were quite heavily regulated by the CFTC. Mm-hmm. You and I were both on a call with the then head of the CFTC. He was then temporary, trying to kind of talk to him about ways to make it less hard to do that. A few weeks after, I got a call from you that you're suing him. Tell us about that.
Sure. So the government has a complicated relationship, put it that way, with PredictIt and with other prediction markets. This is the Commodities Future Trading Commission, and which regulates commodities of the type that I was talking about. And we received, the way University of Iowa did 30 years ago, we received 10 years ago what's called a no action letter, which is a letter from the regulator, and many agencies use this. It's a letter from the regulator that says, if you do, we'll allow you to do what you want to do, provided A, B, C, D, and we won't crack down and shut down your market. And so we received a no action letter, and we got along just famously with the CFTC for 8 years or so. And then we put up that COVID market, that WHO market, which was about the time of great skepticism by some in government that COVID was even a thing. Our previous speaker will attest to that. And that's when the regulators started to make noises about shutting down the PredictIt market. It was shortly after our conversation. Moran is being gentle when he talks about the nature of the conversation we had with the regulator at the time. But the regulator was sort of not buying it. And they feel that these markets are gambling, and that this is, and the latest iteration of the argument is that these are a threat to democracy. And I can give you some of the arguments for and against, but what really matters is the arguments before the court. As Moran said, we sued the regulator because they wanted to withdraw that no action letter. We won. It went to the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals, and the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals says a regulator can't just allow this and not allow it on what the standard is arbitrary and capricious. And so the court, the three-judge panel in the Fifth Circuit, second highest court in the land, said, regulator, you cannot shut this market down. Now, I will tell you, the battle with the government has been expensive, but it has been great for business. And every time somebody tries to shut us down, we get another flood of traders coming into the market. These markets are insanely fun.
How many people are actually out there? I'm curious. How many people bet and how much money is in there right now? It's your site.
Yeah, sure. So I'll give you some big numbers. On prediction markets, on the US election, there's more than, not just on our market, but all these markets combined, there's more than $1.5 billion wagered on the elections. Now, in our market, because we have a position limit, so the position limit says you can't invest more than $850 in any of the markets that we're in. Now, there are dozens of markets, but it's an $850 position limit. And the idea behind that is you don't want somebody who's a trillionaire to try to come into the market and monkey with the odds and do that sort of thing. You can't do that in this market. And markets generally use position limits commodities markets to prevent market manipulation. And our argument, so the court sided with us, we're in business, we'll probably be in business for another 10 years, but the fact of the matter is some well-intentioned, but we think misguided government agency officials see this as a, they want to regulate crypto, they don't want to regulate forecasting different types of events. And I get what they're saying, they just happen to be wrong, and they happen to be operating against the law according to the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals.
Wait, so you give me the numbers of money, how many people participate?
So we have about 250,000 people who have signed up for Predict It. We've got about 80,000 people of those 250,000, 80,000 have at least $1 in their account. And the message board, which is if you go to predictit.com to check it out, whether you open an account or not, look at the message boards around some of these markets. We get more than 1 million comments from people, most of whom are not in the market, but they're commenting on what they think is overpriced shares or odds that are sort of skew, or think the odds should be, and some of these people in those comment markets are trying to pump and dump, and they're trying to do all kinds of things that happen in stock markets. The real decision that's going to come down is whether these markets are going to be regulated and legal and transparent in terms of how the odds are arrived at, with consumer protection, which is what we're arguing for. We think this regulator, whether they want to or not, they need to regulate these markets, or they're going to be offshore, where the most of that $1.5 billion is exchanged right now. Because offshore, you don't have the benefit of transparency in terms of how the odds are arrived at. You don't have the consumer protection. You don't have the research value. We have about 100 universities that get the anonymized trading data to answer some interesting questions about markets. So what makes for a super forecaster, right? What are the traits that the people who seem to get it right all the time, or most of the time, or more often than not, than the herd? What are the traits that make those people better at forecasting future
What are the
elections?
traits that make those people
I knew you were going to ask me that. So I don't know. But we're going to find out. And what's interesting, I can tell you some of the things. If you have, as I said earlier, if you have a little bit of skin in the game, a miraculous thing happens. It kind of clears your head, because you're all of a sudden, you have a little money at stake, and you're trying to think about what's going to happen. Your head, rather than your heart, what I want to have happen. So you put just a little bit of money into a market, and all of a sudden this happens. Another thing happens, which is interesting, and they find out they've experienced this with sports betting. People who have a little bit of money on a football game consume 8 times as much information about the player statistics, the rest of it, than people who don't. So this skin in the game, the thing you found on climate change, if you consistently lose money because you're betting on the wrong side of an event that's going to happen, you're going to, at some point, you're going to get the message. And the other piece of it is that with markets such as this, one of the things that happens is it's an engagement tool, right? Because you have a little money in the game, you're going to spend more time absorbing information. And one of the nice things about it, and the people studying this as well, is, I'll go ahead and say it, we're waiting for some of the research to come back in, but we think Predict It is an antidote to fake news in its own little way. Because if you place your bet based on fake news that you're consuming, you're going to lose your money. And so the fact is, these markets, using market principles to try to forecast the future, and the big beneficiaries of this are not the people that are necessarily betting in the market. It's the people who consume those statistics, because they want to know who's ahead, what's going to happen. Is it as close as people think it is right now? And I can tell you, the market says it's very close.
I'm going to open it to you guys. All the way on the left, we have
Esther.
Thank you. This was fascinating. I'm just curious what you've learned from your KYC data, which I'm sure is protected and you've made promises and so forth, but internally, can you see, who's betting on whom and how that changes by the kind of demographics and geographies and whatever that you have?
Sure, so that's a great question. So yes, the data that we provide to the universities is anonymized, so they can't tell who the traders are. But I can give you some averages, for instance, in terms of what this body of traders are. So it skews male, but sports betting is quite heavily male. This is less so. So we have proportionally more women than sports betting, but still it's less than 25%. So, but it's a larger percentage. It is 30s and 40s. We have people at all age ranges over the age of 18, but we have a wide variety there. The people who are in the market are, it varies by market that we put up, but they are generally college educated. The most common sort of area of employment areas in finance, but also politics. These are people, I would venture to say, who think they know better than the next person what's likely to happen. And indeed, some of them do. But the fact is, so the demographic, and party-wise, to answer the question, it's almost exactly the party affiliation registration split of the United States. It's only US persons. There are offshore markets that you don't have to be a US person to bet in, which, as I say, it's a booming market.
Question from this side. Yes.
So you've had accuracy with the results of elections. Is there a threshold in either time from when the market opened or was established, or market saturation that is a better indicator of when that accuracy takes root? If I'm the last person to make the bet the night before it closes, I'm probably working on more information than the people that bet before me. So is there a market saturation average or a time in market that is a better indicator of that accuracy?
Not that we've seen, but the fact is, when you look at a Breyer, you look at a Breyer score, for instance, which is one measure of accuracy. The forecasting, the prediction markets, the further away you are from the event, the greater the divergence between the accuracy of polling and the accuracy of forecasting markets. That would stand to reason, right? So in other words, if I ask you a question, if the election were held tomorrow, who are you going to vote for? Your answer is kind of interesting, but frankly, if it's 12 months away from the election, who cares who you're going to vote for tomorrow? Because that person may not even be in the race at that point. And there's a lot of information that's going to flood into the market. Now, polling and forecasting markets will generally dovetail as you get closer. And the day before the election, if you ask who you're going to vote for, if the election's going to be held tomorrow, which it is, you're likely to get a more accurate, if you pick your sample correctly and you do everything right in the polling. And we use polling in our business and focus groups, so this is not a knock on polling or even TV pundits. It's just, it is what it is. And one of the advantages to bounce off of your question, one of the advantages of these markets over polling, and you could see this during the Biden-Trump debate. Because, so for the Financial Times, we did an analysis, a second-by-second look at the ticker during the debate. And it was I've never seen anything quite like that, but it was astonishing how Biden's odds just fell off a cliff. And literally tied to, as it sort of stands to reason, right? Literally tied to the answers to, starting with the first question. New information is going to come in the market, right? There was a lively market on who was going to replace Biden. First of all, is Biden going to step down? There's still a market. Is Biden going to step down before January, right? So you can still buy in that. Some of the interest, I was reflecting on your earlier question, some of the interesting markets. So some of the most popular markets, Supreme Court decisions. who's going to be the next justice to resign from the Supreme Court. And then who's going to be replacing that justice of the people that are rumored to be replacements. And you can see on a market like that, you can see information leaking into the market as people are vetted, and even with the vice presidential pick, for instance. People are looking at where the Secret Service cars are going in Ohio and JD, all that stuff. And many of these traders are hyper-focused on these tea leaves to try to discern what's likely to happen. So these markets are a magnet for information like that.
Out of time.
Oh, no.
I see all the questions. It's fascinating. I suggest you grab John afterwards and ask him all the questions about how it's actually playing out in numbers.
Thank you
very, very much.
Thank you very much.